My name is Dorothy. I am 79 years old, and last Christmas Eve I sat at a dining table that could seat 10, with a single candle burning at the center, and no one across from me to watch it flicker. My neighbor Ruth drove over because she said she had extra bread she didn't want going stale. We both knew that wasn't true. She came because she felt sorry for me. I smiled and thanked her for the bread, and we ate soup together in silence, and I was grateful, and I was devastated, and I held both of those things at the same time without letting either one show. My son Kevin had sent a text that morning, a snowflake, just the emoji, nothing else. My daughter Carol had called 2 days before to say she wasn't sure it was going to work out. My youngest, Paul, hadn't reached out at all. I had roasted a chicken. I had made a pie from scratch, the kind with a lattice top that takes nearly 2 hours just to cut. I had set out cloth napkins I hadn't touched in years. I don't know exactly when I became someone my children visited only in theory. I raised 4 of them. 4. I was at every recital, every emergency, every 2 a.m. phone call when the world was falling apart and they needed someone to tell them it wasn't. I drove carpools and made school lunches and remembered every single allergy, every best friend's name, every teacher who made things hard. I thought that kind of devotion left a mark. I thought it meant something durable. Somewhere between their teenage years and my 70s, I became a category rather than a person. The mother, the obligation, the name at the top of a guilt list they carried around and rarely opened. And for a long time, I told myself the same things everyone tells themselves. They're stretched thin. They have mortgages and bosses and children of their own who need things constantly. I wasn't the kind of mother who demanded daily attention. I just wanted to feel like I existed in their lives in some tangible, breathing way. Not as a chore, but as someone they might actually miss. I spent the better part of 7 years doing what every well-meaning person advised. I called. I sent packages. I arrived unannounced with casseroles and told myself I was just being thoughtful. I planned holidays with 3 weeks' notice and asked for nothing except their presence. I made myself easy. I made myself grateful. I told myself that whatever I got was enough, and then went to bed, wondering why it felt like nothing. And here's what I've learned. The thing that sounds almost unkind when you first hear it, but that I believe with everything I have, because I lived through it and came out the other side different. There is one thing, one shift, one decision that changed everything between me and my children. It isn't what you'd expect. It feels uncomfortable at first. It goes against every instinct a mother has. But it works. And I want to tell you about it honestly, the way only someone who has already survived it can. I used to call Kevin every Sunday without fail. I'd ask how things were going at work. He'd say fine. I'd ask about the kids. He'd say they were doing great. Busy, you know, same as always. The conversations lasted 4 minutes on a good day. I could hear him moving through his house while we talked, the TV in the background, the refrigerator opening and closing, The particular kind of half attention you give to something that requires almost nothing from you. I kept those calls short because I didn't want to be a burden. I hung up, feeling diminished. I told myself that was just how adult relationships work. Then I tried making myself useful. I sent birthday cards. I mailed small gifts for my grandchildren, a wooden puzzle, a storybook, a little stuffed animal I'd seen in a shop window and thought of immediately. I wanted them to open a box and feel something that pointed back to me. The thank yous were slow or absent. Once I sent a package and never heard a word about it. I'm still not entirely sure it arrived. I offered to watch the grandchildren one summer. My daughter Carol said, "Oh, Mom, you don't have to do that." As though looking after children I had been waiting years to spend real time with was a sacrifice on my part rather than the thing I most wanted in the world. One afternoon, I drove 90 minutes with a pot of homemade soup to my son Paul's house. I told him I happened to be in the area. That was not true. He answered the door, took the soup, thanked me warmly, and mentioned they were just about to head somewhere. I stood on the front step for less than 2 minutes. He hugged me the way you hug a coworker you run into at the grocery store. Polite, brief, a little awkward. I cried for most of the drive back. I felt embarrassed for crying. I organized a family gathering at my house, gave everyone a month's notice, promised to handle every single part of it. "Just show up," I said. That was the only ask. Kevin said he thought he could make it. Carol said, probably. Paul said he'd do his best. The day arrived. I cooked a full roast with 3 sides and a dessert. I ironed a tablecloth. I put candles on the table. Kevin texted at 4 in the afternoon. Something had come up with one of the kids. Carol showed up, stayed 40 minutes, spent half of that on her phone. Paul never responded at all. I packaged up the leftovers and sent everyone home with food they hadn't asked for. I did the dishes alone in a very quiet kitchen and understood something I hadn't been willing to understand before. It wasn't that they didn't love me. I never doubted that. What I finally understood was that I had made myself so consistently available, so endlessly forgiving, so reliably there, that they had simply stopped thinking about me. I was ambient, background noise, the kind of presence you stop noticing not because it's unimportant, but because it never goes away. I had never once given them the chance to wonder where I was, because I was always already calling. I was the one holding every thread, and they had stopped reaching for any of them because they never had to. There's a little girl who lives at the end of my street. Her name is Penny. She's 7. Her parents both work long hours, and her grandmother is far away. And some afternoons, I started walking her home from the school bus, because it seemed like a small thing I could offer. We fell into a rhythm. She would talk about whatever was happening in her life, a disagreement on the playground, something her teacher said that confused her, a drawing she was working on of a horse with very long legs. One afternoon, she simply reached up and took my hand while we were walking. No reason given, no particular occasion, just because she felt like it. I thought about that for days afterward. Penny wasn't visiting me out of obligation. She wasn't squeezing me into a calendar. She was a 7-year-old who chose to be near me because I had made space for her without demanding anything in return. I hadn't guilted her into affection. I hadn't earned her presence through performance. I had just shown up, quietly and consistently, without keeping score. And somehow, that made her want to stay. Her mother, Anna, started stopping by more often after that, not because I had called. She would knock and ask if I needed anything from the pharmacy, or if Penny could sit with me for an hour while she finished some work, or sometimes just to have a cup of tea and talk about nothing in particular. They didn't require me to be cheerful or useful or perfectly put together. They showed up when I was tired and quiet and a little sharp at the edges. And they stayed anyway. Because there was room for them. Because I wasn't filling every silence with need. I had stopped chasing. And in that stillness, something new moved in. Not obligation, not pity, just genuine presence. So I did the thing that sounds almost cruel when I describe it. I stopped calling my children. Not out of spite, not to manufacture guilt, not as a strategy I had read about somewhere. I stopped because continuing felt dishonest. The effort had been entirely mine for years, and pretending otherwise was costing me something I couldn't afford anymore. So I simply went quiet. I stopped texting first. I stopped calling on Sunday mornings. I stopped sending invitations and packages and birthday cards with little notes tucked inside. I let the calendar sit empty. I waited to see what existed between us when I stopped being the only thing holding it together. For 5 weeks, almost nothing happened. No one called. Or if they noticed something had shifted, they didn't mention it. I sat in my living room in the evenings and watched my phone and thought about what it would mean if I just went back to calling. At least then, I'd have their voices, even distracted. At least then, I wouldn't be sitting in silence so complete I could hear the refrigerator and the house settling and my own breathing. I almost gave in, but I didn't. Somewhere in the 6th week, Carol phoned. It was a Wednesday afternoon. She said, "Mom, I realized I haven't heard from you in a while. Are you okay?" I said I was fine. She paused. Then she said, "Can I come over on Saturday? I'd like to see you." She stayed for almost 4 hours. We didn't talk about the silence. We didn't have to. But she looked at me differently that afternoon. Not the way you look at a chore you've completed, but the way you look at someone you had briefly forgotten existed and are now relieved to find again. Like she was seeing me as an actual person, a woman with a life of her own, not just her mother. Kevin called a week later, asked if he could bring the grandchildren over on a Sunday. Paul texted, the first real message in months, asking if I was free for lunch sometime soon. Carol's husband came by one afternoon without any particular reason and fixed a drawer in my kitchen that had been sticking for 3 years. They started showing up. Not constantly, not perfectly, not as often as I might have wished, but more than before, and entirely differently than before. There was no weight to it, no performance on either side. It felt like they wanted to be there, and they keep coming. Not because I asked them to, not because I guilted them into it, but because something shifted the moment I gave them the chance to notice I wasn't there. I want to be honest with you about something else. I started feeling better before they came back, long before, because I stopped building my entire sense of self around whether they called. I had Penny and her long-legged horse drawings. I had Anna's company and her real, ordinary problems she trusted me to listen to. I had evenings that belonged entirely to me, books I'd been meaning to read for years, a garden that needed attention, the particular pleasure of a quiet house that doesn't require anything from you. I stopped measuring my worth in returned calls and showed up dinner parties. I stopped making myself smaller so I could fit into the edges of their lives. And that, more than any phone call, more than any visit, that was what made me someone they wanted to be near again. Some of them are closer now. Some still keep more distance than I'd choose. I have made my peace with that. I am not collecting people anymore. I am not trying to prove I matter by accumulating evidence of it. I simply am. And the people who see that, who want to be around someone who simply is, they come. The rest I love quietly from where I stand, without resentment. I am 79 years old. I have spent most of my adult life being someone's mother, and I would not trade a day of it. But I had forgotten somewhere along the way that I was also just Dorothy, a woman with preferences and moods and a whole interior life that had nothing to do with my children's schedules. A woman who does not owe anyone her smallness. Here is what I know now. You cannot manufacture someone's desire to be near you. You cannot cook enough food, or send enough packages, or call enough times to make someone miss you. But you can stop making it so easy for them to take you for granted. Not as punishment, not as strategy, as an act of self-respect, as a recognition that you are a whole person and not a background condition of someone else's life. The people who genuinely love you will notice your absence. It will sit strangely with them. And if you are fortunate, they will follow that strangeness back to you. Not because you asked them to, but because they finally understood what it felt like when you were gone. I am glad I went quiet, not because it fixed everything, but because it reminded me that I didn't need it fixed to be all right. I am still here, still whole, still worth the drive, whether anyone makes it or not. If something in what I've shared today landed with you, I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel and leave a comment below telling me your own story. Because you would be amazed how many people are sitting in the same quiet rooms, wondering the same things. You are not alone in this, and neither am I.